These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But those who bear it deserve the thanks of men and women. There's not a soul who wasn't there who doesn't remember it just as it was yesterday. We were a beaten army, a beaten nation, lost every single battle in the year 1776, finally forced to retreat across the Delaware River for shelter in the state of Pennsylvania. There were just a few thousand of us left in Pennsylvania, while the British could mount 20,000 soldiers against us if they so chose. Our army was about to be discharged, their enlistments up at the 1st of January of 1777, and Washington realized it was the end of everything. He wrote to a friend, "It looks like the game is about up." But he decided on a desperate gamble, one last cast of the dice, to try to achieve something out of this dreadful year of 1776, a surprise attack against the town of Trenton in New Jersey, occupied by our garrison of 1,600 Hessians. But to do that, we had to cross the Delaware. It was planned for many days in advance, but no one expected what happened that night. A river choked with ice from bank to bank, coming down from upstream where there'd been a thaw. And to make matters worse, a storm, a nor'easter, with high winds right in our face, snow, sleet, freezing rain. How were we to do it? Thank heaven for Colonel Henry Knox and Colonel John Glover and his Marblehead Regiment from Massachusetts. They were the boatmen who were able to get those big Durham boats with a burthen of some 15 tons, 40 to 60 feet long across the river, through the ice, into the storm, despite everything. Knox, the superb planner, the superb artilleryman, John Glover, and his men from Marblehead, Massachusetts, operating those boats. Had it not been for them, by heaven, we couldn't have gotten across. And as it was, it took from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 2 o'clock in the morning before all of us had crossed the river. 9 hours of complete misery. Glover's Marblehead Regiment, I'll never forget them. Men of both races, white and black, watermen all, professional sailors, the very men needed to make a desperate effort like the crossing, getting us across that river, gathering finally on the New Jersey bank, marching up the hill to the Bear Tavern, and beginning the dreadful 9-mile march south against Trenton, with the storm this time not in our faces, but blowing up our backs. When we reach Birmingham to the west of Trenton, we divide into two wings. General Greene to the north along Pennington Road, General Sullivan to the south along the River Road, so that we may attack the town of Trenton from both sides, from both the north and from the south. Greene encounters a Hessian outpost near the Calhoun Brothers store, smashes into them, begins driving them into the town. At the same time, Sullivan meets another outpost near the Philemon Dickinson house, the Hermitage, smashes them into them and begins driving them into the town. Greene approaches the gateway, the head of the town at the top of King and Queen Streets, and begins to distribute his troops to sweep around the entire part of the northern side of the town. And he begins to place his cannons, which Knox has provided for him. Knox, the chief of artillery, the brilliant artillerist, begins to place the cannons at the head of the streets where the two streets come together. Those two streets coming together, straight as a string and narrow. Cannons placed at the top of those command the entire town. And Greene hears the thing he wants to hear the most. He hears the sound of firing down to the south. That's Sullivan's division coming into the town from the south. He now has the north, and he now has control of the south. He begins firing those guns down both streets. The Hessians are piling out of the houses, all confused, screaming, "Hier raus, hier raus, der Fiend, der Fiend. Turn out, the enemy, the enemy." Complete confusion and chaos, and with a cannon fire ripping down those streets, they cannot form into line of battle. They are a motley, disorganized, torn-up crew. Yet, even so, they try to resist by advancing up Queen Street against Greene's position. It was easy to tell who the enemy were. The Hessian soldiers in their blue coats with their tall brass mitre caps gleaming in the sun. All of Rahl's regiments wore those tall hats, all three of them. so we knew who we were shooting at, though they sometimes weren't sure who we were with the storm swirling around us, making confusion. The cannon fire tore into their ranks as they attempted to assemble. Men wounded, men screaming, men dying. They could not hold a line of battle, and Greene begins to slowly push them south into the town. In the meantime, Sullivan, attacking the south side, his objective is the bridge over the Assunpink Creek. That's the only way out of town to the south. And if Sullivan can take that bridge, then by heavens, he has closed off the southern end of the town to any Hessian retreat. He pushes forward, his divisions and his brigades fanning out, fighting from street to street, house to house, coming closer and closer to the bridge, running smack into the Knyphausen regiment, and they offer him some resistance as he comes closer and closer to the Assunpink Creek and its critical bridge. They call us the Continental Army, commanded by General George Washington. We don't look like much of an army. Hardly any uniform regimental coats in the Army at all. Wearing anything and everything we could get from home, anything we can find here and there. We are a defeated army. Many of us shoeless, many of us with our clothes in ragged condition, many of us with muskets that don't even work properly. So we look like a pretty raggedy lot, and I suspect that we don't impress the Hessians very much. But right now, they don't impress us very much, because we're clearly pushing them back into the town, clearly cutting them up. Oh, they're Prussian, they're beautiful, they're well-drilled, and they are amongst, admittedly, the finest soldiers in Europe, but they've got themselves in a position that's mighty dangerous to them. The weapons used by all the soldiers are the flintlock smoothbore musket. Best trained troops there are can load and fire them about 4 times a minute. And they have one great advantage when you fire them in volleys. When an entire regiment or an entire front fires all at the same time, they lay down a field of hot lead in front of everything that's in front of you. Helter-skelter, but it does terrible damage. And that's the common weapon used both by us and by the Hessians. Now, the cannons, we've got an advantage over the Hessians. They only have 3-pounder guns. Most of our guns are 4- and 6-pounder guns, bigger guns that fire a bigger ball, fire it farther. And God bless Henry Knox. He has managed to bring 18 of those large guns on the Durham boats across the Delaware River as part of this attack. That's 3 times as much as a force our size would normally use, because Knox and Washington know very well that the gateway is the place to place the cannons to command the town. General Sullivan from New Hampshire, an experienced military man, commands the Southern Division. Most of his soldiers are from New England and New York, and a few from New Jersey. And he's pushing into the town, fighting from street to street, house to house, pushing against the Hessian Knyphausen Fusiliers, pushing them back towards the bridge. That's Sullivan's goal. Capture that bridge. If you capture that bridge, you cut off all escape to the south. Some of the Crown forces are able to escape across the bridge before Sullivan is finally able to force it, capture it, and shut down the town from the south completely. General Greene, he's from Rhode Island. A very, very clever man and a fine strategic soldier. He's fighting against 2 Hessian regiments to the north, the Lossberg Regiment and Colonel Rawle's own Rawle Regiment. And he's pushing them to the west side of the town towards an apple orchard where they reform. And instead of heading for the Brunswick Road, instead of charging through the forces there and escaping to New Brunswick, Colonel Rawle turns around and charges back towards Greene, towards the center of the town. His fatal mistake. The Hessians of the Knyphausen Regiment are concentrating in the bridge area. They're being forced there, compacted together, while Greene is fighting the Lossberg and the Rawle regiments to the north. Sullivan is pushing hard against the Knyphausens, and it becomes apparent that he's going to be able to capture that bridge and close off all escape. And now the word comes down. A courier brings the news. Greene has defeated the Rawle Regiment and the Lossberg Regiment, accepted their surrender, and poor Colonel Rawle, the stubborn Hessian who refused to give up, he's been mortally wounded. He's not expected to live. Now all the forces concentrate against what's left. There's the mere 400 men of the Knyphausen Regiment. The rest of the Hessians are defeated, killed, or captured. Pushing hard against them, pushing them. They finally have no choice. They are so badly outnumbered that one of their officers must regretfully surrender. The Hessians stepped forward in surrender, ground their arms, lay their muskets upon the ground, and stepped back. Now they are our prisoners of war. And Colonel Wilkinson receives the sword of surrender and rides up to General Washington to present him with the sword, the symbol of American victory, where there had been nothing but American defeat until the 26th of December in 1776. The Battle of Trenton has been a success far beyond anyone's expectation. Not only have we captured the town, but we've taken more than 900 Hessian prisoners of war, and all of their muskets, and all of their cannons. But we can't stay. With all these prisoners of war, we must go back across the Delaware into Pennsylvania to secure these prisoners where they can cause us no harm. The word gets to Lord Howe, commander of the British forces in New York, and he is furious. Not only has he lost one of his finest commands, some of his best troops, Colonel Rahl is dead, but this tremendous victory of his for 1776 has been blemished. He will retake the town of Trenton. He mounts an army of 6,000 troops, puts them under the command of his best general, Lord Cornwallis, and they begin to march westward towards the Delaware. In the meantime, a week later, we have recrossed the Delaware yet again. We are back in New Jersey, occupying Trenton when we receive the word that the British troops are coming. Washington realizes he's terribly outnumbered and takes up a defensive position on the west bank of the Assunpink Creek, a dangerous place because now all of his army is focused in a little wedge of land between the Assunpink and the Delaware. If the Crown attacks him from the west, he's trapped by water and he's finished. Washington knows that he's in a desperate position, that he cannot get back to Pennsylvania, so he decides to fight a defensive battle by fortifying the far shore of the Assunpink, digging trenches, digging in his artillery, digging in his infantry to make a stand because there's only one way to get to Washington, to cross the bridge over the Assunpink. And Washington knows this. He sends all of his light troops out to Maidenhead, now the town of Lawrenceville, sends them to Maidenhead to slow down the British advance from New Brunswick. Light troops forming up across the road, stopping the British advance, then falling back to another location from the Assunpink Creek, forming up another line of defense, always slowing them down, delaying. Washington wants Cornwallis to arrive as late in the day as possible so that whatever battle takes place along the banks of the Assunpink will take place as close to nightfall as possible. Colonel Hand, who takes command of the light troops, succeeds. It's a brilliant delaying tactic, a perfect infantry screen, slowing the British down as they come into the town, finally reaching the gateway, where Hand makes a stand. He stops, lines his troops up, and they begin to fight back hard this time, not just delaying against the British. He wants Cornwallis's troops to think that Washington has fortified the town to slow them down further, so that they will form into line of battle and take the time that it takes to do that, delaying them. And then, just as the battle is getting pitched and Hand is in desperate danger, Hand begins to retreat down Queen Street. Retreating, turning, firing. These light infantrymen, the riflemen from Pennsylvania, the light infantry troops from New England, turning and firing, slowing the British advance. Washington sees that Hand is in desperate trouble, and he sends Hitchcock's brigade of New Englanders from the far side of the Assunpink across the bridge, running up Queen Street to bolster Hand. Hitchcock now takes the brunt of the battle, while Hand's troops, exhausted from the hard fighting of the long march, literally run to the bridge, run across the bridge to the safety of the American lines. Now Hitchcock delays the British, giving way before them, but turning and firing at every possible opportunity until they too must run across the bridge, and the British finally realize they've been tricked. The real battle will take place on the banks of the Assunpink Creek. Now all of Washington's forces are gathered on the far side, the south side of the Assunpink Creek. His artillery concentrated around the bridge, so that if the British attempt to force the bridge, his greatest firepower will be focused right there. The British begin to come down now, approaching the bridge, but they don't attack. They form up. They create lines of artillery to pound Washington. They organize their divisions into various groups because a decision's going to have to be made. And that decision is this: who will have the post of honor? Who will be the troops who attack the bridge and attempt to get across to attack Washington? The logical choice, from military terms, are the Hessians. They were the ones who were most insulted by Washington's victory at the Battle of Trenton, and they plead for the honor of war to be the ones who will attack the bridge. The day is growing late. The sky is growing dark. Exactly what Washington wanted. The British don't have much time to attempt to attack Washington. They do not have enough time to swing along the banks of the Assunpink, find a place to ford, and attack Washington from the land side, which is the very thing that Washington does not want, because that's where he's vulnerable. As the Crown forces are forming up, a curious and tragic event occurs. The Reverend Jonathan Rossbrook from the Forks of the Delaware in Pennsylvania, not only a chaplain, but also a captain commanding a company of Pennsylvania militia, has somehow been delayed in the town. He's on the wrong side of the bridge. He attempts to head for the bridge, but it's too late. The Americans have already begun to fire across the bridge to harass the British. He now proceeds to go up the Assunpink Creek, looking for a place where he can ford, where he can walk through the water without drowning. Too late. Too late. He's caught by a patrol of Hessians who sword him cruelly with their hangers, slashing him, piercing him with their bayonets 17 times, taking his life, taking his musket, taking his gold watch, taking his money, stripping him naked, and leaving them bare to the cold winter, dead upon the battlefield. The post of honor will go to the Hessians. They will be the ones to attempt to capture the bridge. They form up, form their lines, prepare to volley and charge with the bayonet, and advance against the bridge into the mouth of hell. The cannons across the river in Washington's command are relentlessly pounding them with artillery fire. Whole regiments on Washington's side of the bridge are firing volleys into their ranks. They make it almost across the bridge when they are stopped by a rain of hot metal coming from the Americans. They must retreat and reform. The Hessians reform again for a second attempt. A second attempt against the bridge. With the same determination, though they've suffered serious losses. They form up again and begin the same process of attacking the bridge, but this time they are met by the same rain of hot metal. They do not even make it halfway across the bridge before they're beaten back and forced to reform again. The Crown forces form again for a third charge against the bridge. The sun has set. It is growing dark. It's not like today where we have lanterns to light the streets of our town. When the sun sets, the town goes pitch black. No one can see anything. You cannot conduct a military operation in pitch darkness. The Crown forces know this. Nevertheless, they form up and again attempt to assault the bridge, this time barely making it to the foot of the bridge before the hail of hot metal from Washington stops them in their tracks and forces them to retreat. Now Lord Cornwallis holds a council of war. Should he attempt another attack, even in the pitch blackness? No. His people advise him, during the night, move upstream, up the Assunpink Creek, find a place where we can ford and attack Washington's bare exposed flank. Cornwallis nods and agrees and says to his officers, "Tomorrow we'll bag the old fox." Cornwallis never does. No, because the old fox isn't there. Washington, why Cornwallis calls him the old fox, I'll never know. Cornwallis is older than Washington, who's only 44 years old at this time. Washington knows of a new road that has been cut through to the Quaker settlement of Stony Brook. And during the night, he's going to keep his bonfires going along the Assunpink Creek, but pull his army out and move along that new road to attack the British rear guard of 3 regiments posted at the town of Princeton on the following morning of January the 3rd, 1777. The following morning, January the 3rd, 1777, finds Washington involved in another pitched battle, this time against the brigade under May Hood, which has been posted as a British rear guard at Princeton. And again, after a short, sharp fight, the British being frightfully outnumbered, it is again another American success at arms. Imagine, in a period of only 10 days, Washington has achieved 3 dramatic victories against the Crown forces after losing every other battle in the year 1776. And it turns everything around. From being a defeated nation, we are a nation with hope. Old soldiers, re-enlist. New soldiers, come to the colors. If we can keep our army alive and in the field and never give the British any rest, we have a chance to gain our independence. The 10 Days Campaign, the battles at Trenton, have been the salvation of the cause of American independence.